Good evening. Our top story tonight, Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is the savior of the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson is the day one starter. We're going to be breaking down the Indianapolis Colts, what the ceiling is, what the floor, and more on Player Profiler today. Richardson. You've heard me talk about it for weeks now. I am enamored with Anthony Richardson. He is going to be the day one starter. And it's not just me who is enamored with Anthony Richardson. No, the owner loves Anthony Richardson, loves him. Jim Irsay thinks that Anthony Richardson is a special character. The GM, Chris Ballard, thinks Anthony Richardson is special. And we know Chris Ballard loves his traits and has said in the past that drafting a quarterback means he's now on the hot seat. Because if the quarterback doesn't work out that he drafts, immediately they're going to call for his head. And so this is make or break. Chris Ballard is all in on Anthony Richardson. And so is Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen has been raving about Anthony Richardson, the guy who worked with Justin Herbert, the guy who worked with Jalen Hurts. Even the quarterback that Anthony Richardson is competing against, Gardner Minshew, thinks that the kid is special. Gardner Minshew singing the praises of Anthony Richardson, and the NFL media. They think Anthony Richardson is special too. Stays behind, cleans up after the rookies because he didn't think that it was acceptable, the state they had left the room in. Anthony Richardson is a special cat. He is a special character. He is a difference maker. He is going to change this organization. And part of why I believe this is because the Colts PR team, tip of the cap to the Indianapolis Colts PR team, they have put on a masterclass. Because remember, just a couple months ago, we were talking about how Anthony Richardson might need to take the whole year off, might need 2 years off. He's not going to be ready. If he goes to the Raiders, this is why they signed Brian Hoyer, so he doesn't have to play backup right away. And I was wrong. And the Colts clearly disagree with me. And so we adjust to new information. The Colts are putting on a masterclass in public relations. The hype is building every single day. The hype is building for Anthony Richardson, and it is spectacular. I mean, just look at the guy. Just look at him here in this thumbnail. This is our first view of him as the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts in his jersey. And the guy is shredded. The guy is lean. The guy is a athletic freak. We love Anthony Richardson. And the guy is many talented as well. I mean, just look at this video that I'm about to pull up here. Anthony Richardson juggling multiple footballs. Anthony Richardson is a man of many talents. Is it going to come up here? This whole new StreamYard layout. There we go. All right, let's show it. Anthony Richardson, juggling master. And look at those arms, too. The guy is caked up. The guy is shredded. I mean, look at Anthony Richardson. He is out here having the time of his life, out here having a ball, juggling for the crowd. This is just the masterclass that the Colts PR team has put on. We're all in on Anthony Richardson. Just wait. Some point in training camp, the official announcement will come out that Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback for the Colts. But there will be some time before that. We will hear more good stories. We will hear more praise. We will hear more propaganda of how special Anthony Richardson is. But before we get to all of that, we've got to hear how special our friends over at Underdog Fantasy are.
Let's take a moment to talk about Underdog Fantasy. Now, many of you have already signed up. Thousands have signed up from Player Profiler already over the years. Underdog has supported us since 2020. Much of what you see on Player Profiler is because of Underdog, because of their support. Get the Underdog app, plug in that promo code Underworld, and they're making the NBA fun. Their NBA pick'ems, it's changed my Wednesday night. It's changed my Sunday afternoon. I used to play Underdog just for the best ball drafts. I mean, the best ball drafts are amazing. These draft rooms fill so quickly, and you can win life-changing money. You want to take advantage of all the sleepers we talk about on this show? Well, what better place than in an Underdog draft room to do that? And I recommend taking your Underdog play to the next level by diving into their NFL pick'ems. It's important to correlate those NFL pick'ems. You can pick both the quarterbacks and the wide receivers to exceed expectations. Correlate them, and you can 5x your payout. Bada bing, bada boom. Underdog Fantasy, the promo code is Underworld. For an instant deposit match up to $100, Underdog is the truest friend of the Underworld.
So part of the reason that we're talking about Anthony Richardson here today is because yesterday I did a show alongside Theo Greminger, just one of the most brilliant minds in the industry. I also was alongside Maddie Kiwoom, one of the rising stars of the fantasy football industry. We got together with Wildcard Fantasy. Go follow them at Wildcard Fantasy. They were doing a phenomenal streamathon. Hours and hours. They were doing 4 hours the day we talked to them. We chatted for an hour about the Colts and about the Titans. And what I realized in my research is Anthony Richardson, the floor is extremely high, both in fantasy and real life. Now, we've been talking about that episode that the Podfather did with Rich Rebar for a while now, but the sack rate, the ability to avoid sacks, the ability to throw incomplete passes or just check it down. Anthony Richardson is ahead of the game there, which gives him a higher floor just as a quarterback. And the ceiling for Anthony Richardson, we already know it's insane, but I truly believe the floor this year for Anthony Richardson is Cam Newton in 2020 with the New England Patriots. And realistically, the floor is higher than that because Cam Newton, the shoulder was done at that point. He did not have an arm. He could not throw deep. He had no touch. Cam Newton, with no arm, with no shoulder, 2,600 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. That sounds pretty realistic for Anthony Richardson, doesn't it? Probably less interceptions, probably more touchdowns. But if I told you, oh, Anthony Richardson, he's going to throw 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, no one really bats an eye. They think, okay, well, that's expected. But Cam Newton scored 12 rushing touchdowns, 592 yards on the ground. That got him up to 17.9 points per game, tied with Joe Burrow as the QB 17 that year. So Cam Newton, with no arm, with 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, still finished as a QB2 and gave you many QB1 weeks thanks to the rushing upside. Anthony Richardson has more rushing upside. He's going to rush. If he starts every game, Anthony Richardson will rush for over 600 yards. That is a given. He will outrush Cam Newton. Maybe he doesn't score the 12 rushing touchdowns, but he's going to score more than 8 passing touchdowns. So that is the floor. 17.9 points per game is the floor for Anthony Richardson. And the ceiling, I don't know what the ceiling is. I don't think there is one. We even saw with Jalen Hurts in his first year as a starter. This was his second year in the league, mind you. 3,100 passing yards, 16 passing TDs, but because he rushed for 10 touchdowns, he is the QB6 in points per game. And 3,100 passing yards, maybe not for Anthony Richardson, but the rushing upside, he could be a QB1 in fantasy this year. And that is a bad thing for Jonathan Taylor. We've seen the guys that I'm comparing Anthony Richardson to, Cam Newton, 12 rushing touchdowns that year. That really hurt Damian Harris a lot. 13 rushing touchdowns this past year from Jalen Hurts under Shane Steichen. 10 rushing touchdowns from Jalen Hurts as a, not rookie, but his first year as a starter. That is devastating for Miles Sanders and the Eagles running backs. There was a year Miles Sanders, I don't think, scored a touchdown, period. And then Justin Herbert. Even Justin Herbert had 5 rushing touchdowns. He's going to score more than 5 rushing touchdowns. He's probably not going to get up to 13. 10 is doable, but let's say 8, 9 rushing touchdowns for Anthony Richardson with Shane Steichen. They're going to have a lot of QB sneaks. We know that is what Shane Steichen likes to do, is the 1-yard push And that is going to work so well with Anthony Richardson. He's going to get a lot of 1-yard touchdowns that way, and it's going to hurt Jonathan Taylor. And Jonathan Taylor is hurt in another way because he's never been a back that commands targets. Even the year he finished as RB1, 40 receptions. That was the lowest we've seen in recent memory from an RB1 in fantasy. And he was the lowest scoring points per game RB1 that we've seen in recent memory as well. So Jonathan Taylor, a guy who already didn't catch touchdowns or didn't catch passes, will see a knock in the touchdown department, but we'll see an increase in efficiency with the Konami code Anthony Richardson. That's the trade-off. Less touchdowns, less receptions, because Anthony Richardson's more likely to run it than check it down, but more efficiency. That sounds an awful lot like Nick Chubb. That's who Jonathan Taylor is going to be with Anthony Richardson now. He's going to be a Nick Chubb type running back. He's going to finish 15 to 20 points per game per season. He's going to finish as the RB5 to RB12. Jonathan Taylor is a locked in RB1 the same way Nick Chubb is. But because he lacks the receiving upside and because Anthony Richardson's going to be vulturing him on the goal line, this hurts. Jonathan Taylor does not have the same upside that he once had. And especially because they traded away Nyheim Hines. Remember, they got rid of Nyheim Hines. Jonathan Taylor had the opportunity to be the third down back, the receiving back. He got hurt. It didn't work out. And now they go out and draft Evan Hull, who is the new Nyheim Hines, who is the Kenneth Gainwell for Shane Steichen. He's the pass catching back. Evan Hull has a 55 reception season. Crazy. Evan Hull is one of the better satellite backs in the draft. Evan Hull is going to make a difference in the receiving game, not immediately, but over time. By the end of the season, Evan Hull is going to be taking away even more receptions that Jonathan Taylor just doesn't have to spare. So Jonathan Taylor will be an RB1, but he's not going to finish as the RB1. That is the difference here. He's going to be consistent. He's going to be steady. He is not going to be an Austin Eckler game changer. And that's okay. We can accept that. But if you want more on the rookies that'll be taking passes away from Jonathan Taylor, like Evan Hull, listen on over to the Podfather promo code or promoting the rookie guide.
Oh, I'm wearing Cody's hat in honor of Cody Carpentier. He has finished the rookie guide. It is a masterpiece, the best rookie guide you will read that combines both real NFL draft analysis and fantasy analysis. This guy goes deep. I mean, do you know who Tyon Evans is? This man wrote up and ranked 40 running backs, 40 wide receivers, 15 quarterbacks, and 23 tight ends. 23 tight ends? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. We've got fantasy rookie draft cheat sheets for Superflex and single quarterback to go along with these write-ups that include analytics player comps and play style player comps. All the stats you need, the analysis you need to understand what kind of impact these guys are going to have in the NFL and for your fantasy team. So go to playerprofiler.com, go to any player page, go to the NFL draft section, and click the button to get the rookie guide. It's just $10. That's it. That's all. It's not the most expensive, but it is the best.
So Jonathan Taylor does see a little bit of a hit, as does Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman, currently the wide receiver 24 in the Player Profiler Dynasty rankings. If you want that, go sign up for the Dynasty Deluxe package. You can sign up for the all-in package as well. Get everything that Player Profiler has to offer. Use promo code Jack when you sign up for $10 off. Or you can just sign up for the rookie guide. You can just sign up for the Dynasty Deluxe package. Whatever your choice, you can see Michael Pittman, wide receiver 24. And it's an interesting case because he's behind guys like Treylon Burks, Jordan Addison, Christian Watson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, all those young guys. And I don't see Michael Pittman passing any of them. But he is also behind Chris Godwin, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill. Unlikely he passes those guys in Dynasty this year, but those guys are also getting up there in age. It'll happen at some point, won't it? Maybe. I don't know. Tyreek Hill has another 3 years to go, and he's a win now piece. Same with Cooper Kupp. So I don't know if he'll actually pass any of those guys. There's a chance, but it's not for certain. And then there's the guys behind Michael Pittman. You've got George Pickens. Is anyone surprised if George Pickens is higher in our dynasty rankings by the end of the year? What about Jahan Dotson, Zay Flowers, Brandon Ayuk, Quentin Johnston? These are all young guys that could very easily, with the right season, if things align, could pass Michael Pittman in the dynasty rankings. Some older guys too, like Deontay Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Kirk. Less likely, but still possible. So it's going to get worse before it gets better for Michael Pittman. He's going to have a very high target share. But Drake London also had a very high target share last year. And a low volume passing game. Michael Pittman is so interesting. He is a great wide receiver 3 right now. He's probably going to finish as a wide receiver 2. I just can't rank him ahead of a bunch of wide receiver 2s, but it's going to get worse before it gets better for Michael Pittman. And if there's not even enough room to sustain Michael Pittman, how are we going to sustain Alec Pierce and Josh Downs? It's not going to happen. I don't really care who the wide receiver 2 is because they're not going to finish as a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. Probably not going to finish as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. It's a low volume passing offense. They will need to get rid of Michael Pittman for that to even be possible. And even then, I don't know. I don't see either of them being a full-fledged alpha. Alec Pierce, he's a nice athlete on the outside. He'll have a role in the NFL. He'll continue to have a role. But is he ever going to command a bunch of targets? Is he ever going to be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy? I doubt it. Josh Downs might command a bunch of targets in fantasy, but he'll be more of a Jamison Crowder type where he can finish as a wide receiver 2 if he's the de facto 1 in his offense. But it's going to take some situations to align for Josh Downs. And it won't happen this year and even next year. Do they re-sign Michael Pittman? Do they draft a true alpha and keep Josh Downs as the 2? It's tough in fantasy. I prefer Downs, but really Josh Downs and Alec Pierce just doesn't get it going for me. And they've got backups too. If Alec Pierce or if Josh Downs, they don't work out, Alec Pierce can easily be replaced by Ashton Doolin, the Podfather's favorite. And Isaiah McKenzie can easily step in for Josh Downs if he's not ready yet. So there's backup plans. There's just not a lot to trust here in this Colts offense. Anthony Richardson being better than expected doesn't elevate a lot of other players, though. And it's because he's going to be scoring a lot of the touchdowns himself and rushing for a lot of yards and not passing a whole lot. We also talked yesterday about Jelani Woods. Jelani Woods is the favorite to be the main tight end. Mo Alley Cox is going to stay on the roster. I know there's a lot of people advocating to cut him, but that's not going to happen because he is the blocking tight end. He is the Y, the inline. And no one else on the roster can really do that to the extent Mo Alley Cox can. So he's safe. Jelani Woods is safe, but outside of that, Kylan Granson, he could be on the chopping block if they only keep 3 tight ends. Will Mallory, who they just drafted in the 5th round, he's probably going to make the roster, which makes Kylan Granson expendable, makes Pharaoh Brown expendable. But doesn't matter in fantasy football. No. Is Jelani Woods going to catch 7 touchdowns? Probably not. He'll have some tight end 1 weeks because all it takes is 3 receptions for 30 yards and a touchdown and you're a tight end 1, but there's just not going to be enough volume here for the Indianapolis Colts in year 1. And in year 2, under Anthony Richardson, they're going to add better weapons, I imagine. So Colts are in a weird spot, but this team is improving. Make no mistake. It is. The offensive line is getting better. Quentin Nelson had a bad year last year, and we expect him to get back to the all-pro self that he showed. Ryan Kelly, the center, he is still here. He's getting up there in age, but still a quality center. At right tackle, they have Braden Smith, a veteran stalwart. They're bringing him back. And then at left tackle, last year they started the year with Matt Pryor. It didn't work out, so they inserted Bernard Raymond, who was a 3rd-round pick out of Central Michigan, who was an athletic project, who really they didn't want starting year 1, but he performed pretty well. The number 8 offensive line in last year's class in terms of athleticism, the 83rd most athletic offensive lineman in the history of the Player Profiler database, Bernard Raymond. It's a good pick. These are the kinds of picks that we like, and he will be competing with an even better pick Bernard Raymond will be competing with Blake Freeland, the Oregon offensive tackle drafted in the 4th round, the number 2 offensive line athlete this year, and the number 13 offensive line athlete in the history of Player Profiler. This is an upgrade. Bernard Raymond versus Blake Freeland is an upgrade over Matt Pryor versus Bernard Raymond. So the Colts are getting better. They still have a massive hole at right guard. They should sign Dalton Reisner, who is probably the best offensive lineman remaining, because Will Fries versus Danny Pinter isn't going to get it done, but it's a better offensive line. The defense is likely to be improved. They have not the strongest pass rush. That's the big issue with the Colts. They need an impact pass rusher. Right now it's Kwity Paye and Samson Ebukam, but Kwity Paye needs to break out. Ebukam is not an elite pass rusher. He's a solid starter, comes over from the 49ers, but he's not going to give them 10 sacks. They've got Tyquan Lewis, Deo Adeyingbo, and Titus Leo as reserves, but they need a pass rusher. They need a stand-out edge rusher, someone who can even 7 sacks. I don't know if Kwity Paye, he's probably the only 7-sack guy here. Maybe Ebukam if things break right, but more pass rush for the Colts. They did address it by adding Adetomiwa Adebaware in the 4th round, who was an absolute steal, but he's more of a 3 tech. He'll play some edge as well, maybe some base defensive end, but that helps. It's just not enough. DeForest Buckner and Kwity Paye can't do it all by themselves. They need some help. They will have some help in the back end. Shaq Leonard is expected to be back. He had back surgery and missed most of the year last year. And it'll be Shaq Leonard, who is an all-pro linebacker, with speed. EJ Speed, one of the best linebacker names in the NFL. One of the best football player names ever. EJ Speed. He's going to be the will linebacker stepping in for Bobby Okereke. Last year, Zaire Franklin actually played more than Speed, but that's because Shaq Leonard was out, and Shaq Leonard was the Mike. Now Zaire Franklin comes back. Now Shaq Leonard comes back. Zaire Franklin heads to the bench. EJ Speed will be the starter, but they have a quality backup in Zaire Franklin as well. They have a quality starter at corner. Julius Brents will be the day 1 starter at cornerback. All he has to do is beat out Dallas Flowers, who is an undersized punt returner who outplayed what we expected from him last year, but that's a CB4-5 special teams guy, not a CB2. So it will be Julius Brents opposite Isaiah Rodgers on day 1, Kenny Moore in the slot. Unless Darius Rush, the 5th round pick out of USC, maybe he ends up starting. The Colts just had such a good draft, drafting so many athletes. Maybe Jalen Jones, the 7th round pick, earns a starting job. We've seen 6th round picks, even the Buffalo Bills last year. Christian Benford beat out a 2nd round pick and was starting over him for a lot of the year. The Colts smashed in this draft, and the ceiling for the Colts, this is going to sound crazy, but the ceiling is 12 wins. Hear me out. They're going to lose to the Jaguars, but if they beat the Texans twice, they beat the Rams, they beat the Titans, they split with the Jaguars, they beat the Saints, they beat the Panthers, they beat the Browns. Anyone surprised by any of those wins? Not particularly, and I'm not saying I expect them to win all of these games, but this is the ceiling. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they beat them. They sweep the Titans and Texans. They lose to the Bengals and Steelers, obviously. They beat the Falcons. They beat the Raiders. Tell me, is anyone surprised if the Colts sweep the Titans or the Texans? No, it's just luck. That probably won't happen. They'll probably split, but it's possible. Are you surprised if the Colts beat the Raiders? No. The Falcons? No, you shouldn't be. The Bucs, they're going to beat the Bucs. They're going to beat the Rams probably too. So these 12 wins are possible for the Colts, but the floor is 5-12. They could lose to the Jaguars, get swept by the Jaguars. They could split with the Titans. They could split with the Texans. And then I still think they're going to beat the Raiders. I still think they're going to beat the Bucs, and I still think they're going to beat the Rams, but that's only 5 wins. Most realistic, though, I'm giving the Indianapolis Colts 7 wins. They're going to split with the Texans and Titans. Let's call it that. That is just what happens with bad teams in a division. They're going to beat the Raiders. They're going to beat the Bucs. They're going to beat the Rams. They're going to beat the Falcons or the Panthers, probably go 1-1 in those games. And then they're going to beat the Steelers or the Browns. Throw the Saints in there too. That could be a win as well if you're not confident in them beating the Steelers or Browns. The point is, the Indianapolis Colts aren't the bottom dwellers that they were last year. And the Indianapolis Colts, it's going to be a quick turnaround where they're back competitive, especially in such a bad division as the AFC South. The Colts are coming for the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2023. And if not, Anthony Richardson might have the Colts as the best team in the AFC South by 2024.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out PlayerProfiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.